would like to add though, that, when I think of someone, for instance, like a Cornel West, who was at Princeton and he was at Harvard, and even as a professor, even though he went to those institutions as a student, I believe as well. I'm not sure. I can't remember if he went there as a student or not. I think it's important that we have a presence in other institutions. I think it's important that we show up there so that there is that these colonial colleges, I'll call them, ensure that all professors have a right to their tenure and are given the appropriate support that they're needed. And while certainly there has always been a lot of talk about how, Black people don't need to educate white people about Black history, white people need to educate themselves on it. I do feel like that it is extremely important when we talk about the authenticity of the stories, reclaiming the narrative, that we make sure that the stories that they're telling each other or others that they're teaching are accurate. And I think some ways to ensure that is when there is a diverse professorial body that can be accountable to what is being taught, as well as certainly a diverse student body. And so I'm not suggesting that, we should hold ourselves only for institutions of higher learning that are not HBCUs, but I just think that it's important while we go home and go to those HBCUs that we also ensure that our stories are being told accurately in other institutions.
And I just want to add something to what Gina's saying. She's very right. And the other thing is that all students need to see us in these types of institutions, in all institutions. They need to see people who look like us, having tenure, being presidents of universities, et cetera. And you also, those who go there have the opportunity to see what some might call, air quotes, success or a good school, what it looks like. That happened in my career. I know I was the only administrator in a district where no one looked like me, and there were very few students, but I got to learn what schooling was supposed to look like. So when I went back into schools where everybody looked like me, I had a different concept of what could be expected, Yeah. So that's a good point, Gina, you made.
And I'll add just really quickly, HBCUs, and I'm just biased. I love HBCUs. I love Hampton. We've been deprived of so many resources for a very long time, and still continue to feed into our kids that attend those universities. But the point I want to make is, I think HBCUs both feed into students and the teachers that decide to teach at a Hampton or a Howard or a Spelman. Even the sister that wrote 1619, right? She explicitly said, I needed to feel love, right? And so I think there's a mutual, there's a mutual benefit for both the student and the professor, right? And to Gina's point and Hasna's point, there's also an opportunity to do both, right? A dear friend of mine in the family, Donna Brazil, she and I were having a conversation one day, and she was just kind of talking me through like some of the things that she did for herself as she, kind of built up her career and her next journey in life. And she said to me, I made a conscious decision once I received an offer from Georgetown University to also teach at Howard University, right? And so I think, you know, some of my colleagues and some of those folks in leadership, while their instincts may be to naturally go to some of the higher institutions of learning, they should also think about Spelman down the street or a Hampton University across the street, so that everyone's benefiting from, you know, your expertise, your knowledge, and your resources.
I think that that's what I meant when I was saying about we have to be careful about accepting the value system of the society that we live in. And we have to remember, I went to one of these primary, what do you call them, colonialist colleges. And I'll tell you, not to complain, I got a great education, but I suffered for it. I mean, as a Black woman, it didn't help me know who I am. Now, maybe if you come in and you've got a stronger, you know, network and family and you can handle that, I'm not saying I'm sorry I did it. I'm saying that the bridging would have really benefited both the college I was in and HBCU and moi. I would have benefited from having a connection if I'd been able to, if there were things set up so that we could feed one another. You know, there's a lot that is lost when you're in those colleges as a Black person, you in the primarily white colleges. And so, yeah, what someone said, I needed to feel love, right? You're saying Hannah Nicole Jones said I needed to feel the love. I needed to feel the love. And I was not feeling the love at, you know, I went to Wesleyan, nothing against Wesleyan, but, and so, yeah, I think it's not just these, it goes two ways. It's not just that because HBCUs have been deprived of resources, it's absolutely true. But sometimes when you're the few in those environments, you need the support and the community and the love of an all Black environment. We need to be feeding one another and not buying into that value system of which one's better, because that's not true.
I want to bring up another point as it relates to education in this area, because I went to an arts college, a performing arts college, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this conversation, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. You know, the material that was available to me for like our scene study classes or the plays we did or what was offered, those were all plays by white authors predominantly and white characters that were in those plays, whether it was Shakespearean or whether it was Chekhov or those sort of more classical, you know, European and Eastern European writers. And the opportunity when I was in college for me to pull out, you know, I don't know, a Lorraine Hansberry play and do that. Maybe Lorraine Hansberry, because of the gravitas of her own acknowledgement, but there was very little for me to engage. Now, to that point, and I don't know how it is today, but I can just assume, but cultural institutions now are very, as it relates to, you know, the arts and acting in particular, they're very particular on what you can and cannot perform or what you should explore because of race. And I'll give a very quick example. For instance, I was casting a play in a cultural institution, and there was an Asian young actress who was auditioning for one of the parts. And I asked simply, you know, can you speak in a Japanese accent? Because that was what was called for in the play. And this actress was not Japanese, though she was Asian. And there was this whole like big muck-a-muck, and the dean had to come in. I mean, it was just she was offended that I asked if she could speak with a Japanese accent. Now, of course, in my day, being of mixed race, if they asked me if I could speak Greek, I would say yes, like, yeah, sure, I'll learn how. So there's a very interesting dynamic, because we were also talking about the movement and the differences and how it's grown. You know, there's a big dynamic in education right now, I think, across different kinds of schools and disciplines, especially when we think about critical race theory, or when we think about like actors coming to learn their craft and technique. What are we teaching our students about the cultural experience are you only able to stay within your genre because that's where you're from and you can only be what you know? Or are we offering an opportunity for people and students alike to expand their purview and perhaps engage and be interested in something that isn't necessarily so close to home? I don't have an answer, yes or no, to that, and I don't know if either or is right or wrong, but I just bring that up because when we start to talk about race and institutions, I always think about the challenges that come up depending on the kind of school that you're in, around these issues.
Thank you for offering that. And I'm thinking about the point that Suzanne made about challenging pretty much the machine, and the education machine, I'll probably say, is no different. My wife is over here agreeing with you, Gina, because our daughter plays piano, right? And they're only talking about the classics. How do we introduce some composers that look like her into her music lessons? She ice skates, and not many of her that look like her ice skate, right? So how do we infuse music in that realm? So you definitely hit a button here. So I appreciate that for sure. All right, let's see. Anything else? Anybody want to add anything else to this conversation?
You better stop us if you want to.
Well, hey, we're good on time.
Stop us.
Yeah, because we got stuff. We got stuff to say.
All right. Well, so again, we have prepared questions. I'll go ahead and ask this one. I'm gonna modify it a little bit. But the third question that we had prepared was: as daughters of highly esteemed activists in the African American community, what are some of your current day contributions to further the objectives of your parents, and not just your parents, because I'm sure you have your own, right? Your own women, your own lives. You stand now, right, in your own path. So maybe those things that may be parallel, not necessarily run exactly along the lines as them. So if you don't mind sharing that, and I can repeat it if you need me to repeat it.
Dom.
Well,
Come
one
on,
of the
Dom.
things, so I've been working, my father, Reverend Al Sharpton, I've been working as a director of the organization he founded in 1991, National Action Network. I've been working here for 14 years now. So that's almost half of my life. And when I came to work at National Action Network, I noticed that, and we talk about this, we can talk about this dialogue because it gets really fuzzy in certain areas, but how the past generation, how that connects to the future generation of activism and how that looks moving forward. And my father always talks about, how, one of the things that him in his position now, having done this work for over 50 years in the struggle and the fight for equality and fighting for justice, that's a long time to be doing something, in this work. He often talks about how one of the issues with this generation is that they are, he calls them microwave activists. So a lot of people, they want things, instant, they want the instant gratification, they want to get in, we're angry and we want change right away. And not understanding that a lot of this work it's a marathon. It's not necessarily a sprint. And so you could be fighting an issue for, 10, 20, 30 years, generations, and see a victory, see a Derek Chauvin being convicted after fighting 30 years on, police misconduct and police brutality. So, really trying to bridge that connectivity and understanding our history in conjunction with putting forward the strategy to move forward and how we progress in this current climate of change. And so one of the things that I brought to the organization with my sister, we've, founded the National Action Network's Youth Huddle, where we've created a safe space for young people to develop, activism, learning how to strategize and organize, learning how to confront issues, and learning how to be a part of the discussion of how we implement change in our generation. And we've been doing that. We actually started it in the aftermath of the Trayvon Martin verdict. And Trayvon Martin was killed 10 years ago this coming weekend, would have been 27 years old last Saturday. And so we, in light of that that energy that sparks, a movement of youth, of a lot of future generations to get involved after the outrage of that aftermath. We said that we need to create a space where young people, no matter where they are in the country, no matter what passion they have, no matter what skill sets they have, they can come to these discussions and they can talk about how they can fight for voting rights and how they can fight police misconduct and how they can be a part of fighting for education equality, and not and be a part of making them aware of the history and learning what came before us, but also setting the path and the agenda of how we sit at the table for the future. And so that's one of the things that I'm doing. My father was a part of Operation Breadbasket, and that was the youth arm to Dr. Martin Luther King's SCLC movement. He was in New York. And so that was one of the things that I guess paralleled our interest. But I never really thought of myself as an activist. I'm more of an artivist. So I also want to ensure to continue to develop stories, especially being presented in mainstream, of how people tell our stories all the time. People talk about Black culture and they want to, as some of my sisters talked earlier about, monetizing that and how that is perceived and pursued, but also to make sure that we are behind telling those stories and that we are sitting in the director's chairs and in the producer's chairs and in the creators' chairs, and making sure that we are a part of, telling our stories and making them mainstream. So that's another thing that I'm working on doing.
Awesome.
That's our baby, by the way. She's the baby of the group. Baby with the bangs.
Baby with the bangs.
Dominique, the youngest. I'm the baby in my family, but I prefer youngest. The youngest.
There you go.
I'm the youngest.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest in my family, but I'm the eldest of this sisterhood. So I guess I can go next. The activism that shows up among us represents several of the ways that one can be an activist. There's several stations. Everywhere you stand, you're a station, you are a general, you can be an activist from where you are and whatever you do. And my parents used their art as their activism. My mother, especially being the first in some things, the roles that they took, and the roles not only that they took on screen and on stage, but the roles that they took in the very public marches and actions in life. They were the MCs for the March on Washington, for example. And they instilled in me a sense of well, let me go back to Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King mentioned that, not everyone has to be out in front. There are folks, you think Sidney Poitier, for example, who by way of his work elevated the plight of people, of African Americans specifically. And so through art and through the way you move about the world, you can also help tell that story that Dominique was talking about. And I believe that my art shares the story of humankind and brings folks, that's photography and writing, and brings folks into a positive light that can be seen and enables them to tell their stories, or even me to tell my own story. I consider myself to be an education activist. And as an educator, I believe that that is the way that we will gain justice. If there's no education, there will be no justice. And if there's no justice, there will be no peace. And my goal is to amplify the voice of youth in the design of a educational ecosystem that has as its center compassion and the truth. It also to elevate education on the social justice agenda and to build a diverse teaching force as well. I work with individuals and organizations to help diversify civic and educational leadership spaces. And I think that helping to build capacity in others speaks to what I mentioned before, but also is an action preparing folks. We have Kamala Harris in the White House, and that's all great. And we have many other BIPOC men and women in places right now as we sit and speak. My thought is, who's going to take their place? That's where I come in, helping to prepare those folks to take the places of the folks who are there now, having that plan. And so I think that that's where I believe my action lies. And I do, I think it reflects what my parents thought and planned for me, and what they always talk to us about, the folks behind the camera, as well as preparing people for a strategic trajectory toward leadership and action. And that, I think, is important. And that's something I do.
It's funny how in line a lot of us ended up with. We do other things, but we did carry forward the work of our parents. I mean, we stayed in a similar, in some ways it feels very similar what we're doing. I could be wrong about that, but I feel that. I mean, you're so influenced by the home you grow up in, and you see what kind of work they do. So, you know, I'm also working in the arts, and I guess that's no surprise, but it surprised me because I went somewhere else for a while when I came back. I was in journalism, and then, but I'm in the arts now, and I'm working on I'm working on a documentary about my mother. First of all, she passed away October 2019, and I'm working on another television project. And it's what I was saying before about that show that so impacted me called Black Love, which I was so in love with because they are choosing the message they want to project of us, and it's different from the one that's normally monetized. And that's the same ethos in the way I'm trying to approach these projects. There are things I want to say for us, and it's a machine. The machine, you have to work with the machine, you know. You've got to raise money, you've got to get a platform so that you can get out there. So you're going to have to interact with people who may not have the same agenda, the same focus. Theirs may really just be about how can we make money off of this. So there's a real art to figuring out a way to get your message out and still get your money, still get your project out as well. So, I mean, I'm working on that. And I think that I think the more I go into the work I'm doing, the deeper my appreciation of my parents, I would say, the deeper my understanding of what they were really up against. You see it, but as you get older, you really understand what Dominique was saying about how long they did that work. You know, and how every time they had to get up again, and the odds, the things they were against were not really changing, and they still had to support one another and bring that optimism and keep going. How long my mother had to walk into spaces where they wanted to diminish her. The people she was talking to when she started in the 50s and when she ended, I don't know how much they learned in all that time. I think they were still trying to diminish. And she still had to, push forward. So I also want to say the other activism we do, and someone else can talk about this, is us. We created this group. I mean, Stacy started it and reached out to Keisha, who's not with us, Keisha Sutton James, the granddaughter of Percy Sutton, and reached out to Gina. That's how it started. And then they reached out to more of us. And clearly we're not all the daughters of. We have so many, we have family members who are also daughters of, we have so many others out there. But what we wanted to do was personal first. We wanted to feed one another. Stacy did it. I'm telling her Stacy's story, but she did it because she needed this community and a safe space, and it built from there. But this is a form of activism, we realized as well, to let people share in that spiritual legacy that we have and encourage them just by, I guess it feels really powerful to see the children of, the daughters of these amazing people come together. And we just want to use this as a model for people that you can do this as well. Black women coming together multi-generationally, that's what we are. We range from 30s to older. There's a power in that. There's a power in that. And we are benefiting from it and we're sharing it, but you can do this just as well. And many Black women do this, this is our secret sauce. So
thank you for letting me be in that space.
And we love our brothers. You are welcome to be with us.
Anybody else want to speak to this?
And it's of course not only for Black people, but it needs to be rooted in this. And then there's a special wisdom that we have and we share it, and then everyone is welcome to it. But there's something about coming together first.
Yeah, especially because our parents were together.
And
our parents work together.
Yeah.
And that makes it special.
Yeah.
I'll touch on this really briefly, and I don't know, I'm sure Gina has some things to share as well. My dad was the person behind the scenes. He was known as the Rumple genius, the person behind New York City's first African-American mayor, David N. Dinkins. He was his campaign manager, his strategist, worked with Gina's dad, Harry Belafonte, to organize social activism campaigns, consulted and advised Dominique's dad, Rev, and then also was an advisor to Nelson Mandela, Hillary Clinton, a whole host of folks in national and local politics. And I wanted to be a sports agent at 18 years old. I thought that was my path until in 2013, when my father passed away, and I decided to work for, at the time, Bill de Blasio, who worked for my father when he was deputy mayor under Mayor Dinkins. And for years, I fought that, just being in politics. I was like, that's not for me. That's not who I am. I enjoy music, arts, and entertainment. But I also found out I love politics. And it was during a conversation, probably, I think, a panel that we had. We talked about activism and how activism appears in different shapes and forms. And, I pride myself, like my father, as an activist inside government. I'm normally the person in the room with the voice shaking, saying to a high-ranking elected official that this policy or our position will not help our communities. And so I think I've adopted that very much from my father, and also organizing people and convening people together. I think, I'm very much a prototype of my father in that way.
Thank you.
Apples don't fall very far from trees. We're all apples. Similarly to Dom, I run an organization. I'm the executive director of an organization, sankofa.org, that is founded by my father in 2012. 2012, 2013, it's very important times for us in this group. And I think a lot of it has to do with what was happening in the world and in the United States in particular, politically, and as it related to the movement and technology. Because whether it was the Arab Spring before, or Trayvon, or then later Mike Brown or Rekia Boyd or whoever it was, we were able to mobilize in a new way that we hadn't realized prior. And I think those of us who chose to continue to be in this process of whether it's artivism or educationism, how do we do that one? an edu-artivist. I don't know. Edu-activist?
Educate, activist. Educate.
Activist?
I'm gonna figure it out. We're gonna figure that
Figure it
out.
out. If anybody-
Education activism. we just
Somebody in
put
the
them
chat,
together.
figure it out. Educativist. Something. Yeah.
Point being that, you know, I think our generation, and meaning in each of our families, the next generation of us that chose to continue the momentum of what we engaged in, what we saw, had a new way of evolving. And so I think that part of what the gift for us, and even our sisters who aren't on the call, is that regardless of the challenge, the struggle, the loss that all of our families have been through and embraced, the intention behind what everybody was doing was so much greater than themselves alone as an individual, that we saw the power and also the joy that it brought to our parents or grandparents to be of service to community in the ways that they were able to bring themselves to do that. And not all of our parents, you know, did it in healthy ways in terms of taking care of ourselves and, you know, being, you know, but we have now come together in this collective, knowing how our parents had supported each other and been there for each other. We have now taken that concept to a whole other level, I think, where we check in on each other around our physical health, our mental health. We bring a lot of joy into each other's lives. We make sure we get together so that there is an intention behind our well-being, which is also what we think is political. And that we think that by taking care of each other in a very holistic way, we are being more of service to our community and to those who we serve. So the organization that I run is a social justice impact entertainment enterprise. We were trying to figure out, how do we institutionalize the capacity of someone like a Harry Belafonte or a Ruby Dee or an Ossie Davis? How do we begin to inform younger generations of artists on how to organize and how to use their platforms to elevate and to shine a light on issues? And we do a lot of other things too. We have programs that go inside institutions of mass incarceration. We have organizational programs around civic engagement with our youth. So yeah, so, and I also too, like Dominique, I'm an artist, and like Hasna, I'm an artist, and like now Suzanne, who now I think she can call herself an artist now. I think journalism is art as well, just to say that. But and so I too, I direct, I produce, I also act in things and teach and coach. So, you know, all of us are also giving space and room for each of us to evolve and stretch ourselves within our group. We're able to see, you know, now that I'm thinking about Stacy being, you know, wanting to have been in sports, I'm like, well, how can you, you know, reintegrate that back into, you know, like work with the NBA,
I wish.
you know,
I wish.
you know, you know, but anyway, we spark, our passions individually spark inspiration in all of us as a collective. And I think that is also something that we take from our families and bring forward, is that they inspired each other. They inspired each other to do better. They inspired each other to write better, to perform better, sort of almost full circle back to that Black excellence concept.
Gina, real quick, excuse me, real quick. I know Stacy has to jump off. I just want to acknowledge her. First, thank you for joining. I appreciate it.
Of
You have a
course.
busy schedule, I'm sure. Anything you want to, any parting words before you roll out?
Well, I'm here for another 10 minutes. I just have to.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah,
I
we have
thought,
some time.
all right.
So
Cool.
I want my sister Gina to finish her thought.
All right. My apologies.
I can wrap it up. I can wrap it up right there. You know, so yeah, so I think certainly myself, but all of us have taken the drops, the pearls of wisdom, being at the feet of giants in our in our collective, history of America, and been able to sponge up and soak in all of the richness that brings with it, and have, used those tools to amplify what we want to carry forward and how we want to be of service, and also the outreach that we have amongst our own family members and our young people.
There's one thing that Gina was talking about that I just want to bring out even more, which is that you would ask what was different before and what we can do now. That generation, they weren't really, there wasn't as much room or acceptance of taking care of your mental health. There were some things were revealed that Dr. King, at one point, they knew that he needed to go to a therapist. It would have really relieved some of the pressure, but it wasn't allowed because the FBI would have just been exploited and weakened the movement. And so, yeah, I think one of the things that's different is now we're more aware of the toll of activism on your mental health.
And on your physical health as well.
Physical health.
When you're going, fast food is real easy.
Yeah, how do you take care of, how do you have downtime, all those things. So we do support one another in that. And often in panels, we talk about those of us who've found different roads for healing our mental health, whether it's therapy or something else. Take that stigma right off that therapy in the Black community. Just let that thing go, because who needs support more than we do? Who's been through more than we have? So I think that's a difference now. We're much more open about it. There's online, Black, there are therapist organizations online that are trying to increase the number of Black and brown therapists and LGBTQ plus therapists, and like all the marginalized folk, whatever you want to call, trying to make this thing look more like us. So you know who you're talking to, and you feel they understand you better. But it's changing, and that's part of this generation's work, I think.
Yeah, I just want to shout out, support Black women. I know that there are many other women, our brothers who are on as well, but Black women in particular, for many generations have carried the brunt of the world, the brunt of the family, the work that has been done, and are the ones who are least recognized to be supported or honored for their voice and for their strength. So thankful for the sisters, for sure. Gotta shout them out. And without us, I don't know where this world will be, where we will be in the world. So
Yeah.
And we were considered to be the most expendable, and we are not. We are the ones, the caretakers of the children and bringing up this world, as Dominique was saying.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, because that was one of the questions. I'll skip over 4 and go to 5. In particular, like I don't know if any of you have watched. Rashay and I were having this conversation. I don't know if any of you have watched Women of the Movement. That was kind of following the Emmett Till story and his mother in particular. So the question about Black excellence, I'm sure, is gender neutral in that regard, but women sometimes, like you're mentioning, oftentimes are overlooked through the civil rights movement, or you hear about your Rosa Parks and here or there, but the important role that women played in past day, present day, future movements, right? How do you elevate that voice? So that was just one thoughts on that series. If you watched it, I mean, I think we pretty much know the story of Emmett Till, but I didn't know as much of the story about his mother and her activism, how she became an activist out of that. I knew less of. So any thoughts on the series, but also the idea of women being a central part of the movement?
Let me start this.
Okay.
Oh, good. No, Stace, because you gotta go. You
Yeah.
gotta go. So you start.
I'll be really quick. So I did not watch the series, but I will once I take a few days off next week for my birthday. But I will say this: I was really fortunate to have a progressive father, right? And he was a feminist in his own right, and so my dad surrounded himself with smart, incredible intelligent women. And so I was able to like feed into that. And you know, it was a great example for me as a young woman. And he would include me in some of these meetings, which was crazy. Like I would be in a room and he would have a conversation with a Hillary Clinton, or his advisors include Dorothy Height, who was a major player in the civil rights movement, but didn't get her just due. He was also advised by Marion Wright Edelman. And so to be able to see these incredible women who were behind the scenes, but didn't get their just due, really informed me as hopefully a future leader. And before I depart, I just want to say that I so much appreciate my sisterhood and being able to participate in forums like this and kind of share with others what this sisterhood is about and what it's meant for me. And, you know, my hope is that people across this country, this world, can develop their own sisterhood like we have.
Thank you.
And absolutely, Stacy, I'm not going to blow up your spot and ask you the question out loud, but you know the question I'm going to ask you.
What's that? Come on.
No, you know that question. You know that question.
I'm still the second youngest.
Okay, so my question to Stacy almost every time we speak is, when is she going to be president of the United States? When is that coming? Every time, you see, I told you I was trying not to blow up your spot. Okay, but that's preparation for you. Okay. Asking the question, holding that expectation.
A few more years.
Okay.
Should we start the exploratory committee now?
Why not?
Yeah, let's talk later. Let's talk later.
I love you all.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.
I want to go to the Emmett Till, Mamie Till Mobley conversation. I have watched it and I have read about it. And I remember as a little girl, my mother talking to us about it. We would have conversations all the time. That's what we had conversations about, you know, the movement and the struggle is what they called it at the time, which it still is. And the conversation was why she had the casket open and why we had to look. And we had that conversation all of the time. The importance of why she did it and the importance of the fact that we had to look. And that was one of the things that I was taught as a child. I had my Black history lessons at the dinner table all of the time. I had those books in the libraries. We had those stories. And so I had that cloak that helped me through, that continues to help me through existing. But let's flip the script on the African-American women or the women of the movement, not their stories not being as prominent or the work not being as recognized. It wasn't about the recognition, first of all. But if you think about, for example, the work of Juanita Poitier, the first wife of Sidney Poitier, you don't know the work she did, but how central her work was and important it was to jobs, to working with folks like Malcolm on a global perspective, Lorraine Hansberry, all of those wives. Gina can tell you about Julie Belafonte. You might not have read all of the things she did. She was a fierce sister. You had the women who worked for Martin Luther King. You had the women who came to the March on Washington, didn't speak, but they were there. You had the planners. Why can't those women who made the meals for not only the men, but for the children like me who were hanging around? That's up here too. That's just as valuable as those folks who had their microphones and pumping their fists out in the front. So let's consider that the work that these women did, as we might see it as marginalized, as stories undertold, certainly, because we're not hearing those stories. But I know in my heart that they knew what they were doing, and that they knew that their work was important, because these folks who went out in the front couldn't have done so without knowing that their children were being cared for, that their business was being taken care of. So I think that women now have a different position because we have more opportunity, we speak up more, and there's probably more of us, on the planet anyway. And we can make statements about how we matter, no matter how we show up, that our work matters, no matter how we show up, whether we have gardens at attention, or we have hot meals in the kitchen, or we are helping those crack babies get off crack, or all of that. That was some fierce, I'm trying to think of the woman in Harlem who did, her name is escaping me.
Hale,
Of all
Mother
of those,
Hale.
yes, Mother Hale, all of those folks. We just have to tell our stories. Artists like us now, we just have to tell those stories. And I want to go back to, say it again.
And I said, and there's so many, all the way back
yeah.
to suffragette, because
and I want to go back to
the Black women of the suffragette movement are never discussed. And not only are the Black women of the suffragette movement never discussed, when women got the vote, Black women were not included in that. So anyway,
that's right.
And and history. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Hasna. So hold the thought, please don't forget it. I just want to add it, just like it's an ongoing similar thing that happens throughout history. Just like when our Black servicemen went across the ocean to fight in the Second World War against fascism and came back basically to fascism, or so it's just this dynamic around our Blackness also that is really challenged.
Now you asked me to hold that thought. See, I told you I was the elder one, so that's a little,
Well, we were talking about the how we need to tell our stories.
That's true, and
I'm not included in them.
My father-in-law and Keisha's grandfather were both Tuskegee Airmen, and that what you just said brought that to mind. But I wanted to end my comment about Mamie Till Mobley with a piece of art that was made by a white woman and exhibited at the Whitney and maybe in other places. And there was a controversy about how could we allow that white woman to tell our story with this image. And it was a great image that captured the disfigurement of Emmett's face and the emotion of that time and that incident. And whose story was it to tell? But it was Mamie Till Mobley. What I told my children, who are now grown, was that the reason, and I heard a father tell a young man while looking at the picture, the story. This father told the son the story of Emmett Till. And I said to my children, that's exactly why she left that casket open. So that that father, who happened to be white, could tell that child what happened to Emmett Till. That's why she left that casket open. That's why it was okay, my personal opinion, for that artist and any artist to render something that was respectful of Mamie Till Mobley's desire for the world to know what had happened to her son because of the color of his skin.
Very well said.
When we shine a light on the true history of this country, which is what we do in those moments, the hidden history, the things they're trying to not have us see, we are doing this for the benefit of the whole. We push this country closer to the founding ideals. We always have. We're not trying to do something different and pull it away. We're actually the ones trying to hold us accountable as a country. So it's always been for all of us that we're shining a light on our real history. This,
I mean, a whole other,
is for everyone. I know people don't feel that way, but it actually will benefit all of us.
yeah, and on that note, Hasna always brings up this concept of allies and how there really are no allies. We're all in this together. That's why when you say Black History Month, which I'm grateful for, so that we can highlight that Black excellence that we so often have brought up during this discussion. But so for so long, Black history, when it was taught in school, was only about the struggle, was only about slavery, or only about the civil rights movement. Whereas what I'm hopeful will prevail is more of these conversations about all the people that took place during a certain time in history that helped move an agenda forward and gave it its opportunity to, be more well observed and understood. But we talk about allyship a lot and how we want to reclaim that concept in a way. And I don't know, Hasna speaks about it often. It's something to consider, that, we're really all in this together.
Yeah.
Turn our allyship into ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to just point out, we moved on to another topic, but speaking of Black history, so my father, Reverend Sharpton, his latest book is called Righteous Troublemakers. And he talks a lot about some of these stories that we've talked about, a lot of them related to Black women in the movement who, made extensive strides in helping us progress forward, but whose name we don't know or never heard of. And he talks about people like Pauli Murray, whose early work, encouraged and informed Thurgood Marshall for his legal argument in Brown versus the Board of Education. He talks about stories like Claudette Colvin, who was actually sat on the bus, the segregated bus, and refused to give up her seat months before Rosa Parks did. But because she was dark-skinned and was pregnant and not married, the movement thought that she was not the right look to launch a national movement around desegregating the buses, or desegregating the system of Jim Crow. And so these stories, and he really depicts it and goes through it, and I encourage everyone, if you, want to get something for Black History Month, or if you want to, just delve a little deeper into history, pick up that book. It's a plug, but it is a great read. Because I think that it is really inspiring, and especially for our generation moving forward, we should know the history in some of these stories. So pick it up.
Thank you for that.
Get your Ida B. Wells Barbie doll too.
And get your Ida B. Wells Barbie doll too.
I have
I think
one.
Rashay came through with the post for Amazon, or you could go provide your dollars to a Black bookstore, one or the other. Black bookstore.
They have some local ones in Silver Spring and downtown.
Yeah. Saying
They look pretty
somebody
good.
somebody's going to say something else. I'm sorry.
I just want to, we have been talking so much about Black women, Black people, but it really is an effort we all have to do together. And sometimes I think the language can make some people feel as if we're not in it together. We are in this together. You want to come into the Black community because of our warmth and our joy, but we need one another, absolutely. And when we are divided, when it's the LGBTQ plus community over here, and which is ridiculous because it doesn't make sense, but anyway, and the African Americans here, and then we're weakened. I mean, that's how truly how they divide and conquer us. So, it's all about, really, in a democracy, it's about the vote. And when we see one another as one, we have a voting block. And that's what the 1%, if you want to call it that, that's what they're most afraid of. So yeah, we are really more powerful when we're together. And when we speak in this language, as you know, we're saying it out of love and inclusiveness.
Thank you. Well, the time is 4:29. I know we wanted to open up for questions. I know, and I'm sure you all have schedules, right, to maintain. So if we have time, Rashay, I'm looking at you. Do we want to?
Ladies, are you guys okay with still receiving a few questions? Or are you okay with, ending here?
How about one question?
Yeah, let's do one question. I'm
All
so
right.
sorry.
No pressure. No pressure. Who's coming through?
Pick
Yeah,
one.
we're sorry.
Okay, if you guys can just put one question in the chat and we'll try to answer it for you.
Sometimes we get to talking and it just,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
told
and
you
if
about
not,
this.
you think of something later, we'll leave our website. You can reach out to us and stay engaged with the Daughters of the Movement. We would love to stay connected and engaged with everyone. So please reach out to us.
Yes, go to our website.
Should we put it in the chat?
I've already put it in the chat.
Thank you, Rashay.
Thank
Well,
and Instagram also.
well, seeing nothing pop up, and I want to make sure we end on time, be respectful of people's time. I am going to call it quits then. Thank you. I appreciate you,
Marcus. You
Gina,
were
Hasna,
so good.
Suzanne, Dominique, and I know Stacy had to go, but thank you again, Stacy. And look forward to continue watching the work that you all are doing, and hope to have you all again sometime very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Just
all for
bring the
joining
daughters
us
back
today.
for Women's History Month. Come on.
Yes.
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 All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
And thank you all
Please,
for joining.
please,
All right.
please click that link, and we have surveys before you leave, just so we can know if it's something you like. Take that survey. I'll put the link for the Daughters of the Movement website there for more information. Please tap in. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
Sure. I don't know if you need me to stay on or not. I was just hanging out. You don't have to keep me spotlighted though.
Let me
Marcus, stay on for a second, please.
Oh, let me stop the
Okay.
recording.
Thank
I have to
you.
stop the recording.